Hello everybody, this is Refresh and I am here to take a look at the Yanling Planeswalker deck from Magic the Gathering Core Set 2020. This is a blue deck, and on the back here we have Mu Yanling Celestial Wind. Mu Yanling relies on her quick wits and elemental magic to travel safely through strange, dangerous worlds, disrupt your opponents with spells as your creatures fly over their defenses. You get a deck box, 60 card deck that you can play tabletop or online, so you get a code for Arena. A 15 card booster pack, which is less than the usual 2, but this costs less than the usual Planeswalker deck, and a strategy insert and 2 reference cards. Let's go ahead and confirm the contents. Alright, we have Mu Yanling Celestial Wind, a 6 mana, 5 loyalty Planeswalker. For +1 until your next turn, up to 1 target creature gets -5, -0. -3, return up to 2 target creatures to their owner's hands, and -7, creatures you control with flying get +5/+5 until end of turn. It's kind of a very specific abilities here. This is very tempo on the top 2 abilities, and this is only good if you have a lot of flying creatures, but I'm supposing that that's what Yanling is going to have. There's some cool Planeswalker art here. Let's take a look at the contents. We have a pack, of course, at 2020. And then a Hey Before You Play on the strategy insert. That's just going to tell you that play with the deck before you mess with it. And it says, playing the deck, Yanling knows better than to brawl toe-to-toe with bigger foes, relying instead on mobility and surprise. Send flying creatures to chip away at your opponent's life total as you weaken their creatures and interrupt their plans with spells. Keep them guessing and never let them build momentum, and soon your evasive army will be victorious. Very, very generic explanation of what a flying blue deck is trying to do. I kind of wish that there was a little bit more information here, as usual. But there is some information about some of the mechanics you'll encounter. I think the counters thing is particularly useful because the cards don't do a great job of explaining them. However, these two, Flash and Flying, usually have reminder text to let you know what they're doing on the cards themselves, so not as useful there. And Mu Yanling's search for her beloved mentor has taken her across many worlds. Having lost her family as a child, she's determined to do whatever it takes to save the people she loves. Her powerful storm magic keeps her safe in her travels, while her mischievous wisdom helps her make friends wherever she goes. This is perhaps one of the better descriptions of a Planeswalker, because we actually have her story. We know what she cares about, what she's trying to do, and why she cares about them and what she's up to. So, not bad. I kind of wish that there were a few more words here to express specifically what worlds that she's from and exactly what her quest is, but this is definitely one of the better descriptions of a Planeswalker. On the back we have some information about how to play Planeswalkers, very important information that's kind of confusing at times, so I like that they have a whole page dedicated to this, and I like that there's no ads here eating up precious space. Now to take a look at the deck. Alright, our rare is Dungeon Geist. It's a 4 mana 3/3 with flying, and Dungeon Geist enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step as long as you control Dungeon Geist. Very good card from way back in the day, and still pretty useful because it is basically a 2-for-1. Yanling's Harbinger is Yanling's rare that searches for her Planeswalker card, and it is a 2/4 flyer for 5 mana, and then it grabs this card from the deck or the graveyard, so pretty decent. You get a body that goes with what this deck is trying to do, and it gets you the next card to play on the next turn, so not bad. Riddlemaster Sphinx is the other rare. It's a 6 mana 5/5 with flying, and when it enters the battlefield you may return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. This does play with the flying theme, however this is also available in the welcome deck for blue, and so it's kind of redundant that you get this in this deck as well. I kind of wish that they chose a better rare from the set that would also fit in with this theme. Celestial Messenger is one of Mu's commons here. It's a 4 mana 3/2 with flash, flying, and it gets +1/+1 as long as you control Mu Yanling, which, you know, is not that exciting because it does play with Mu's deck's themes, but this is always so dependent on you having the Planeswalker that it's not as exciting. Waterkin Shaman is Mu's uncommon, and it says whenever a creature with flying enters the battlefield under your control, Waterkin Shaman gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So this gets benefits off of your flying creatures. It's kind of aggressively statted, so it would be a 3/2 and then, you know, maybe a 4/3 if you cast 2 at a time. I like that it doesn't require Mu Yanling to be on the battlefield. And then you get your reference cards, some very useful information on Planeswalker loyalty, combat damage, attacking and blocking, and the phases of your turn. So I like these for beginners. And then you have a fairly useless popular Magic formats card here, which is not informative enough to be useful or evocative enough to make you know what you're getting into, so not the most useful reference card. But the back does give you the code for Mu Yanling's Planeswalker deck that you can play on Arena. I've already redeemed this, and you'll probably see a video with me playing it on the channel. But now that we've taken a look at what we have inside, I'm going to play some games with this, and I'll be back to let you know what I think. So I got to play with this deck a bit, and here are my thoughts. The first thing that you have to notice is that there are three real things going on with this deck. First of all, it is a flying deck, and you can see this from the inclusion of the 3 Warden of Evo's Isles and of several flying creatures in this deck. In fact, the only non-flying creatures are the Brineborn Cutthroats, the Waterkin Shaman, and the Frostlings. And the Waterkin Shaman actually gains a benefit from playing flying creatures, and so there is actually a reason to have the Waterkin Shaman in a flying themed deck. Furthermore, the Winged Words also draws you cards for less mana if you have flying creatures. And so that is one of the themes of the deck, and it's probably the strongest represented theme of all. Especially if you get multiple Wardens of Evo's Isles on the battlefield, you can really spit out some of these more expensive flyers. Other than the flying theme, there are 2 other themes present here, and you can see them in the other 2 creatures that we have here. We have the Brineborn Cutthroat, which gives you benefits if you play cards on your opponent's turn. And that means that there is a bit of a play cards on your opponent's theme here. It's a minor theme, and it's only really supported by the Brineborn Cutthroat, which is really bad unless you actually do play cards on your opponent's turn, the Spectral Sailor, and the Celestial Messenger, all of which can be played at instant speed. These 3 cards sort of enable your Brineborn Cutthroat to get bigger, but on the other hand, this deck isn't really well dedicated to that, and so I feel like this is a bit of a miss in terms of a good sub-theme for this deck, especially since the Brineborn Cutthroat isn't especially defensive with its stats of 2-1, and so you are not really doing much aside from trying to be aggressive with this deck. And a lot of Flyers deck would actually prefer to have more defensive ground creatures so that they can block the opponent's early attackers until you can get your Air Force going. And not having that makes the Brineborn Cutthroat feel a little odd in this deck, especially with only so many ways to trigger it instead of the bulk of the deck being dedicated towards it. It feels a little bit more like a throwaway creature. Similarly, the Waterkin Shaman, without gaining any evasion, it just gets a stat boost, and so it feels a bit more like an aggressive throwaway creature that eventually becomes useless towards the latter part of the game, because even though you're playing Flyers every turn, a 3-2 is just not that impressive, even if you can play it on turn 2. The final theme of the deck, and a bit more of a minor theme, is the tempo theme in this deck, and you can see that with the Frostlings. So what the Frostlings does is when it enters the battlefield, it causes one of your opponent's creatures to tap, and then not untap for the next turn. And this idea of getting tempo is also seen in the unsummon effect here, which for 1 mana can knock a creature back to your opponent's hand. Now it doesn't give you card advantage, it's actually card disadvantage. However, if you play it right, you can make your opponent waste turns, and therefore get in with your creatures for the win. Now, one of the issues with a tempo game with a flying deck is that when you have a flying deck, you have so much evasion, and you really don't need a lot of tempo. Now, it's good to have creatures or spells that can bounce one of your opponent's creatures if they have a good flying creature that's blocking, or if they have a serious threat that you need to get off the board. However, because so many of your creatures here are evasive, it's actually not terribly useful because you can still go in on the attack if they have a flying creature that could block. And yes, you may lose cards in the end to lose one of each to a superior flying creature. At the very least, you're going to be doing more damage and theoretically win over time. Now, Riddlemaster Sphinx is one of the few rares from the Welcome decks that actually fit into this game because it not only is a flying creature, but it also provides tempo, and I think that's why I actually like this inclusion in this particular deck. But I think if this deck were a little bit more focused and cut really down to only 2 of the existing themes and then switch some of the cards out, and I would choose tempo over the flash theme, I think it would be much better. Yanling herself actually does a little bit of each. As you can see, her defensive plus up causes one of your opponent's creatures to be -5, -0, kind of nullifying it. And then you can bounce your opponent's creatures, and then you can, if you get to the ultimate, which isn't far away because she starts at 5 loyalty, you can just boost your flying creatures to a huge amount and win. And so I think that she does play into the themes of this deck pretty well. It's just that I find that the 3 themes are maybe too many themes, and I would have just really moved towards 2 themes. Also, there are 25 lands here, and I feel like this deck is not the most mana hungry. Yes, there are some 5 drops and 4 drops, and there's even a couple 6 drops, but I feel like it could go down to 24, especially since the Warden of the Evil Isles works as a mana cost decreaser, and so this may be one of the weaker 2020 Planeswalker decks, but still, I think because of its relative consistency compared to a lot of the previous Planeswalker decks, it's still a pretty good deck. And it's a nice beginning spot for a proper Flyers deck in Constructed. So I think it's a decent deck. It's definitely better than the Planeswalker decks of yore. And if flying is your thing, this is not a bad place to start. If Flash is your thing, there are some cards here that you might want, but honestly, those cards are pretty cheap. And so I would just build the Flash thing from scratch. That's where I will leave this one at. If you got to play with this deck, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more such videos, hit subscribe. This was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.